Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Shah Weekly. Now before we dive into the implementation details, let's go ahead and check that what you will be building in this video. So when I launch the app, you can already see all of these different hotels and information being displayed on the screen. All of this information is coming from our own server implemented in JavaScript, Node.js, Express.js. All of this data is hard-coded, as you can see. But the main thing about this video is about the filters. So let's go ahead and apply the filters. You can see that we have different filters. We can filter by price. So if I want to filter from 0 to 250 or 225, and I want to see the hotels that provide me breakfast and Wi-Fi with a rating of 4 and above, then I can filter it and I can see those two hotels. I can also go to the filter and you can see that it has sustain the state. The state is still there. It's not like the filters are cleared out or anything. I can go ahead and select a filter called parking. So now it's going to show me the hotels where the price is 0 to 225 and parking and 4 rating, and there's only one. So you can see the filters are working great. All these filters are implemented on the server side, and which is in Node, Express, and JSON. In Express and resulting in returning JSON. The client is implemented using MVVM pattern. Let's go ahead and now dive into the implementation details so as to how to build this complete app. All right, everyone. So now that you have seen that what we will be building in this video, let's go ahead and get started. So I've already created a default project for SwiftUI application. You can see it's really nothing much going on in the SwiftUI project. It's a default project, okay? The next thing that I want to do is to show you a little bit of a server. Server is using hard-coded data. You can see I have hard-coded the hotels, and we have one route, which is hotels, which returns you all the hotels. We're going to go over what these things actually does a little bit later, but you can see that if I go to the localhost 8080 hotels, it's simply going to return me an array of all the different hotels. So the first task for us is to display all the hotels on the screen. All right. So we can start with the content view, but I'm going to go ahead and start with creating my web service, which will be my client actually, which will be performing the request. So let's go ahead and add a Swift file. We will call it web service. And we will start with the web service. So web service, and it will only have one particular function, which is get all hotels, and we can use URL. So somebody's going to pass in the URL. Async throws, so we can use the async and await feature of Swift language, and it's going to return us an array of hotel, which is a DTO object or the model that we're returning, but we currently don't have that hotel. All right, so let's go ahead and create that also. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder called models, and inside the models I'm going to go ahead and create a file called hotel. And looking at the response that we are getting, you can see that we have ID, we have title, amenities, rating, price, and photo URL. Amenities is kind of like an array. So we have to, when we're returning this JSON from this URL, we have to create a model on which this JSON can be mapped onto. So that is the reason that we're going to create our hotel. Now, not every single thing needs to be mapped because we're not really displaying the amenities on the screen, but if you had to display, then yes, we will have to map the amenities also. All right. So I'm going to go struct hotel decodable, and different kind of properties that we want. We want the ID, title, photo URL, rating, and price. So all of those different things, we will go ahead and add those properties. Now, if you do want amenities to be displayed on your main screen, you will go ahead and add it over here. But I'm not displaying amenities. If you want to, you can definitely do that. Going back to the web service, now we can go ahead and start implementing our get all hotels. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a request, URL request, passing in the URL. And you're going to see later on that why are we using this request. We can actually use the URL also if you want to. I mean, we don't technically have to use the request. I think I was doing it for some other reason, but we can use the URL. We already have the URL, right? So let data and response try await URL session dot shared dot, and now we can use the async await feature, passing in just the URL, which is this one. So we'll just pass in the URL. We don't really need a delegate or anything like that. Next, we need to check that if we have received a good response, meaning HTTP status code for 200. And if everything is good, then we can perform the JSON decoder.decode as an array of hotel, and we will provide the data to decode it. We will also make sure that we get the hotels so that we can return it. Now, finally, we can return an array of hotels. By unwrapping it, if there's a problem, we will simply return an empty array. Currently, you can see that we don't really have anything called network error. So this is some enum error type that we can create, as you can see over here. So this will be our web service. Okay, so that looks good. I think the next thing that we want to do is to create the view model, because the view model will be responsible for calling the web service getAllHotels function, getting the data, populating it into a view model, and then passing it to the view. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new group over here. I'm going to call it view models. And inside this view model, I'm going to add a new file. And I will call it hotel list view model. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with the view model. Class hotel list view model, and we will make it an observable object. Now, the hotel list view model will have one function called populate hotels. All right. And this will be an async function. And over here, we can go ahead and get, first of all, the URL that we have. So if you look at the URL, that's the URL that we need. But instead of putting the URL somewhere in our code like that, what I'm going to do is eventually going to create a constants file that can return us the URL. So let me go ahead and add a new file called utils, new folder called utils, and add a new file which we will call constants. Constants file will have all the different constants. So constants, and it will have a substructure like URLs, and that structure can have a simple property called all hotels, and we will assign it a URL which we already have copied. And we can unwrap it. So we can use this all hotels now. So going back to the populate hotels inside the hotel list view model, we can go ahead and get the URL and perform the web service. So web service dot get all hotels, passing in the URL, which is from constants dot urls dot all hotel. This is actually going to change a bit when we will provide searching capabilities, but we're starting out with no searching capability right now. We will get the hotels. All right. And since the get all hotels is a async function, we have to await for it. And it can also throw an error. So we have to use try. And we will have to wrap it with do, so that if there's any error, we can go ahead and catch the error and do whatever you want with the error. All right. Okay, so we have the hotels. Now, currently, we don't really have any view model to map the data to. So I'm going to go ahead and in the same file, or you can use a different file, going to create a hotel view model. The purpose of the hotel view model is to represent every single hotel, like one hotel. And you can see that in order to create an instance of hotel view model, you need to pass in the model for the actual DTO object or the model coming from the JSON. The hotel view model consists of many different properties like ID, title, photo URL, and so on that will eventually be displayed on the screen. Next up, we can create a property which can hold the hotel view models or an array of hotels view models. This property is marked with the publish keyword, which is basically saying that whenever this property is assigned, then it is going to emit an event which can be captured in the view. So the view can update itself. So let's go ahead and set this property self.hotels, which is an array of hotel view model, and then hotels.map. So this is the hotel, the model, and when we're mapping it, we will create an instance of hotel view model.init. Now, since over here you're assigning it to a property that is marked with publish, we can actually go ahead and we should do that in the main queue. So I'm going to go ahead and do it in the main queue. Now, you can go ahead and also decorate it with main actor or as a property wrapper, but that was causing some issues later down the road. So that's why I'm simply using the dispatch queue.main.async. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay, that looks good. So this hopefully should be our hotel list view model. Now we can jump into our content view, which will be responsible for displaying all the different hotels. The first thing we need to do is to make sure that we are creating an instance of hotel list view model. So state object private var VM hotel list view model. Great. All right. Okay. So hotel list view model, that is perfectly fine. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to display the hotels. So we'll take the shortcut for now and try to see if we can display the hotels. So we're going to use a list, go through the hotels. We're going to get access to the hotel, and we will try to see if we can say hotel.title, just to see can we even display a hotel or not. So let's go ahead and run it. Now the one thing that we still need to do is we need to call the VM, which is hotel list view model dot populate hotels function, because if we don't call that, then it's not going to fetch anything. And finally, you can see the hotels are being displayed, right? So next step for us is to make sure that we are extracting out this list, because we do have to display the hotel with the image and the price and all of those different ratings also. So instead of doing it over here, what we can do is we can create views, and the views, that particular view is going to help us display a hotel list view. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new view, and SwiftUI view is fine. This will be hotel list view. Okay. So the hotel list view is responsible for displaying all the hotels. All right. So someone is going to be passing in the hotels, which will be an array of hotel view model. And the whole point of hotel list view is to simply display all the different hotels. So hotels over here, I'm just going to pass in empty, nothing over here. Again, I'm going to use list hotels. I will get a hotel in, and now again I will create another child view, which is hotel cell view, in which we will simply pass in the actual hotel, and list style can be plain. Now we don't really have anything called hotel cell view. Again, I'm going to go to the views and add a new view. It's always a good idea to create these sub views so that they are reusable in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and create hotel cell view. And the hotel cell view is the actual one which is responsible for displaying the information related to the hotel. So we are going to pass in a single hotel view model, and then it will be responsible for displaying all of that stuff. So let me go ahead and copy it over here, because that's just a view part of it. We don't really need to display any preview for this one. Okay, so a couple of things over here are not working. You can see that hotel is displaying the price, and we're calling a function called format as currency, but we don't really have that function. So let's go ahead and create that function. I'm going to go ahead and create an extension folder. And in the extension folder, I'm just going to perform an extension on the double type. So double plus extensions. Okay, so I already have the code, so I'm just going to copy it. It's simply extending the double type with one additional function called format as currency, which is simply going to display the currency. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay, good. Going back to our content view, we can see that in the content view, we are using a list. Now we can change that a little bit. We can say we can use a hotel list view where we can pass in the hotels, which in this case is vm.hotels.task await vm.populate hotels. All right. And we will also going to make sure that we are using a navigation view and all that stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a navigation view. This is up to you if you want the navigation view or not. We will probably be helpful if we have the navigation view. And now we can add a bit of a navigation and a toolbar and all those different things. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to do it over here. And since eventually we do want to display a modal, I'm just going to add a is presented property, which we are setting it to true when the button is clicked. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and try to run this. And there we go. So hotel list view is responsible for this whole list or this whole view, and the individual hotels, these cells, they are coming from the hotel cell view. So it looks like it is working pretty good. We also have a filter button, which doesn't really do much right now. If you click on it, it doesn't do much, but it looks like we're getting all the data from the server and we're able to display all the different hotels. Now, the next part that we want to do is we want to show a modal when you're filtering. All right. So that will be done by the sheet, meaning the modal or the sheet, whatever you want to call it. So that is what we're going to use. So let me go ahead and try to add it over here. Dot sheet is presented. So in this case, it's presented. We're just going to say is presented. And the content that you want to display, well, that will be the filter view. All right, but we currently don't have a filter view, by the way. So filter view will be responsible for giving us the options so we can actually perform the filter. I'm going to go ahead and add a new view. And I will simply call it filter view. Okay. Filter view doesn't really have much going on, but at least we have a filter view right now. Okay. The next thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that the filter view consists of all the different components, the views that it needs to filter. All right. And it should be able to dismiss also, because the filter view is actually displayed in a modal. So we have to make sure that it can dismiss also. Let's go ahead and run the application now to see what it actually looks like. And one thing I noticed is that if you are using Xcode 13.3, the filter button, sometimes it works, especially in the Xcode preview, it doesn't work as expected. So that's why I'm actually launching it in the normal simulator. But you can definitely see that it is working perfectly fine now. All right. The filter view doesn't really display anything right now. So that is something that we need to do. We need to create all of those different filters to allow the user to filter using the price, using the popular filters as well as the star rating. All right. So let's start with the pricing part of it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add a VStack. Let's go ahead and resume this so we can see what we're building. That will be really helpful. VStack. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a VStack. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a heading dot font, title, and also font weight. Let's say bold. And let's go ahead and put a spacer so everything is kind of pushed up. All right. We can set the alignment over here to be leading, so it is on the left side, left to right. And we also need to make sure that our VStack that we have just created, it is good width. I mean, it does have a nice width going on, which we can set later on. That's not a big deal. All right. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is we want to display the price. We want to, if you want to filter by price, so then we want to display the price. Okay. So I'm going to add a slider with a value. So the value of the slider will go into somewhere, let's say price, which we don't have. The price is going to be between 0 to 500. If you're booking a hotel, this is the maximum that we're going to allow you. And step means the price is going to increment by 1.0. All right. Now, we don't really have anything called price, so we can go ahead and add a state variable, price var double, and we can start with, let's say, 100. Okay. And we're just waiting so that it can at least display us something like a slider or some sort of a control. Okay, so you can definitely see the slider right there. All right. Now, price, we have created a state variable, but maybe it might be a good idea to use something else. Like probably we should use a VM, meaning a view model. So maybe we can create a filter view model. All right, so let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and add it over here. I'm going to call it filter view model. And the purpose of the filter view model is to gather everything that we can from the filter view, which includes the price, the ratings, and the selected popular filters. Good. Let's see over here. Okay, we don't have anything called popular filters, so we need to also create that. Popular filters can include filters like breakfast, parking, Wi-Fi, and all of those different things. I can put it over here if you want, or we can put it in a view, or you can put it in a new file. That's up to you. I'm just going to put it right here in the filter view. These are the popular filters that we have. Okay. Okay, now we can go ahead and start creating our filter view model. There we go, filter view model. And in order to create the filter view, we are going to make a dependency on the filter view model. This means that if you want to create a filter view, you must pass in the filter view model. So we're just going to make sure that we're initializing it. Okay, this means you can see over here that you need to pass in a view model, filter view model. And we're still having some issues, so let's go ahead and see what's going on. Okay, over here we need to pass in something. So filter view model. Okay. Now let's go back to the filter view because we are still not done with the filter view. There are a lot of different filters that are remaining. Let's start with adding a little bit of padding to the VStack. There we go, much nicer. Okay, so we got our pricing filter. That looks pretty good. We would like to display the price also. So when you're applying the filter, maybe it's a good idea to display the price. So there we go. I'm going to display the price. All right, we're going to change that from price to vm.price bindable. So every time we are going to change the slider value. Our VM, meaning our view model, is going to change. We don't really need line number 19 anymore. Everything is in the filter view model anyways. The next thing is to implement the popular filters. Let's go ahead and put some sort of a heading for popular filters. Let's see how it looks like. There we go. All right. I'm going to also add a spacer, so kind of like everything is kind of pushed up a little bit. Okay. All right. And let's see over here. I think we don't really need this one, so let's remove line number 30. Okay, perfect. Now the popular filters can be like if you want to search for hotels that have breakfast, parking, Wi-Fi, these kind of things. Okay. We already have a popular filters enum, which contains the breakfast, parking, and Wi-Fi. So all we need to do is to display this, and kind of like a checkbox says. All right, so let's go to do that. Popular filters. You can go ahead and run a loop on popular filters dot all cases. We can do all cases because we have marked our popular filters enum with case iterable, which means you can iterate through the cases. The ID in this case will be self. We will get a filter. And now we can go ahead and build something. So let's go ahead and add a edge stack. And I'm going to go ahead and use a system name. If I'm just trying to create a particular square, then I can use a system image, which can be just a square. And you can see already the squares are being displayed. Pretty cool, right? And we also want to display a text. So text can be filter.raw value. And there we go. So we got all the filters. Now currently we won't be able to select anything. So even if I run this, I can't check mark this. I mean, I may be able to move this one, that's fine, and the price changes. But the popular filters, even if I try to check them, it doesn't work. All right, so a couple of different things we need to do. The image currently is not really tappable. So we need to be able to tap the image. So on tap gesture. Okay. Now, the first thing we need to confirm is if the filter that you're tapping is already added to the filters array, which is part of the filter view model. If it's already added, we don't really want to add it again, right? So let's go to the filter view model. You can see that over here, you have popular filters. And we don't really want to add it again and again. Like if you're saying breakfast and then you uncheck and then you say breakfast again, we don't really want to add breakfast 2 times, obviously, right? We just only want to say, this is our filter, it's called breakfast. For that, I'm just going to go ahead and create a small function, which is going to check that if a particular filter is already part of the popular filters array, which called contains filter. So you're going to pass in the filter as a string, and it's going to simply tell you true or false if that filter is already added to the array or not. So using that approach, now we can do something over here. So on tap gesture, which means if you tap on any of these images, which currently only displays a square, then you can say if vm.contains filter a filter.raw value, if it does contain that, if it doesn't contain that, if it does not, then go ahead and add that popular filter or appended the filter. All right. Else, if it is already available, then we just want to remove it. Popular filters or remove all, and we can use remove all over here and remove the one that we need. So $0.raw value, if it's equals to filter.raw value, then just remove the filter. Okay. The next thing we need to do is currently it is only going to display a square, which you can actually see, which is right there. So we need to switch between a square and between a something else, which can be a checkbox. So let's go ahead and do that. If vm.contains filter which is filter.rawValue. If it does contain filter, then we are going to say checkmark.square.fill else square. All right. Let's go ahead and run that and see if it does have something. And uncheck, check. Pretty cool, working like a real checkbox. Every time we check breakfast or parking or Wi-Fi, that particular filter is added to the view model populate filters using this code. And every single time that we uncheck it, then this code gets fired and that is removed from the popular filters. So that's pretty cool, right? The next thing that we want to do is we want to allow the user to select a particular rating. So they can say that, hey, I want to only display hotels with 3 or above rating. So here we go, we have a rating. And in order to display rating, we're just going to use some hard-coded stuff. All right, so nothing crazy, just some hard-coded stuff over here. There we go. All right, so you can see that we have over here, just going to say gray over here. Let's see. Okay, gray, and the selected one can be blue or whatever. Okay, so you can see that we have created 5 different ratings over here, which are simply some boxes, and you should be able to select those things. So let's see. See that? Pretty cool, right? Great. Okay. Now the final thing is the button. So I'm going to go ahead and create a button. And we need to make sure that we are saying that the button style is border prominent. And we need to also see that what the button will actually do. Let's go ahead and say it's going to say apply, I guess. There we go. All right. Now, if you do want your button to be a little bit more nicer or width will be 100%, I'm going to use a different take on creating a button. And you'll see that we can actually pass in the action meaning when the button is clicked, and the label over here. Now, label is simple because it's always going to say apply. That's what we're trying to do. And since we want our button to take up the whole screen, we can actually add a frame. There we go. And now we can add a bit of a padding on the top. So we can use the edges on the top. Can be, let's say, 40. Okay. And button style is bordered prominent. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now we can go ahead and apply the filters over here. All right. Now, when we're applying the filters, I do want to give the opportunity to the parent or the person, the view that opened this modal to actually perform the request. So instead of performing the request in this particular filter view, I'm going to create a closure which can be passed in. So I can say on filter applied, which is filter. Now, what are we going to return? So I'm just going to return something called a filter view state. And you're going to see in a minute what that is. You don't really need to create filter view state, but instead of passing in 3 different values, one for the price, one for the popular filters, and one for the rating, I'm simply passing in the filter view state, which will contain all of those different things. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a simple file called filter view state. Again, filter view state is not really a mandatory thing or anything like that. I mean, if you just want to pass in the, if you just want to pass in the price, rating, and filters, you can actually do that. You can even pass in the filter view model. If you want to do that, that is also perfectly fine. Okay, here we go. We have filter view state. And this means that whenever you are creating the filter view, you must pass in the on filter applied, which is a closure, and this will be a filter view state and void. so that we can go ahead and set it up. So on filter applied equals to filter applied. So in order to create the filter view, you must pass in the filter view model, and you must pass in the on filter applied as a closure. Both of those things are mandatory. Okay, so now let's go ahead and see over here at the bottom. It's also complaining that you are trying to create a filter view, but you're not really passing in anything. So here we go. I'm just going to pass in a trailing closure just so that this requirement is met. Okay. And once you click the button, this is where we can construct a view state, which is filter view state, passing in the price, which is vm.price, vm.rating, and vm.populate filters or popular filters. On filter applied, passing the vs, which is the view state, and also making sure to call dismiss. Great. Let's see what this error is. Yeah, the error is simply saying that in the content view, you were calling the filter view, but you didn't really specify, well, a couple of different things. You didn't really specify the vs, which is the trailing closure actually. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that part. But before we do that part, you can see that over here we're passing in, whenever the sheet is presented, we're passing in a filter view model, a new filter view model. That's the important part. And we have to see that what exactly happens later, that if it works or not. Okay, so over here we are getting something back like a VS, which is view state. And we can say vm.populate hotels. But now the problem actually happens is, let's see what's going on over here. Okay, let me go ahead and copy some stuff over here. Let's see over here, filter view. I think we're having some issue over here, filter view. Okay, so we need to pass in a filter view model. I'm just going to go ahead and say filter view model, create a new instance. And now I need to pass in the view state, and this should hopefully work. So once you perform the filter, that is where you need to populate the hotels again. So vm.populate hotels. Unfortunately, over here, it's not really going to do much because you didn't really use the filter. I mean, just by calling populate hotels, it's simply going to return you all the hotels, right? You didn't really apply the filter anyways. The other thing that you're doing is you're calling it await, but you're not inside the async context. So we need to wrap this around kind of like this so we can perform the async stuff. Okay, but the problem still remains that even though you're calling populate hotels, it's not really going to apply any filter. All the filters are right there in our view state. So somehow the populate hotels, you should be able to pass in the filter. There we go. Now, populate hotel does not really take in any arguments. So this means that this requires a change in our hotel list view model where the populate hotels is implemented. So I'm going to say that, yeah, you can pass in a filter if you want to, which will be filter view state. And it's optional. So you can pass in, but it will be nil also. I mean, there's a possibility that it's just nil. Now, how are we applying the filters? That's the most important part, right? When you create the filters, when you have all the filters, you make a web service call. But just by making the web service call, how are filters being applied? For that, we have to go to the web service and see how the filters are being applied. So over here, you can see in the URL, now I'm applying a filter for breakfast. The URL is the same with one exception, that now we have added these query strings, which contains the actual filter. You can see that my filter is that the price has to be 0 to 224. and popular filters right now is breakfast. And you can see that most of the stuff that I'm returning is the one that contains the breakfast. If I go over here and say the popular filter is parking, then I'm only going to get the one that contains parking. So the basic idea is that the URL is the one that is getting altered based on the filters that you have selected, and that's called the query string. So we need to generate these kind of URLs in our code, in our iOS application. Currently, if you go to the constants.urls.allhotels, you will simply see that we're not really doing anything with the URL. It's just plain URL, just going to hotels. And that is where we have to make a change. Instead of a property, I'm just going to go ahead and create a all hotels where you can pass in a filter, which is filter view state. And this is going to return us a URL. Now, how are we going to construct the URL? Instead of using hard-coded string, and let's go ahead and comment that one out, we're going to use the URL components, where we will carefully construct the URL based on what we're trying to do. We need to check if the filter is not null. So if let filter equals to filter. So if it is not null, then we can go ahead and use URL query item and construct those query item like price, popular filters, and rating. And finally returning the components.url. All right, let's go ahead and see what's going on over here. We have a static function. Okay. And now we can use this all hotels function instead of the all hotels property that we had, passing in the filter so that it can generate us all the different URLs. Now, when you do that, the all hotels is going to return you an optional thing, meaning it's going to return you a URL which is optional. So maybe we should do that a little bit outside of it. And then pass in the URL when we want something. So there we go, URL. Okay. So we call all hotels, we pass in the filter. Based on the filter right over here, we ran all of this code to construct a URL that may look something like this. And that will allow the server to return a particular response. Let's go and build it. Okay. And let's go ahead and see now. Let's go ahead and run it and see that if it allows us to apply the filters yet or not. So currently, when you run the application, you can see all of the data being displayed. There are no filters being applied right now. I'm going to say, give me something that is at 0 to 281 value that has Wi-Fi and breakfast and 3 or above rating. And now you can see that there are 2 hotels that have 3 or above rating in that price range, and that also has a breakfast and Wi-Fi. Now, if I go ahead and select, now a couple of things you noted over here already, that my filters are now gone. Everything is resetted, so that's not good. So we need to fix that also. But let's continue with something. Let's go ahead and say, I only want to see the one where the price is from 0 to 243. It has a parking and rating 4 and above. So definitely our filters are working because it only shows you one of them now. But our filters are also reset, which is not good. Okay, so let's go to our content view where we are over here. And one of the things I note over here is when you are creating the filter view, you are passing in a brand new filter view model, which means that it is actually killing everything in that. So instead of passing in the brand new filter view model, we can construct a filter view model on the top and use the same filter view model instead of constructing it from scratch again and again. Let's go and do it again. Filter breakfast, and let's say rating 3 and above. Great. And now you can see that all the filters are already there, and now I can apply it. So there's only one Nikki's Resort which contains all of those different things. If I say, give me the one that is Wi-Fi and at least 4 rating, then a lot of different comes up because a lot of different hotels have Wi-Fi. So there you have it. We have created our application that allows us to take the data from the server and to display it and also apply the filters using our server. The server is the one which gets the data, and over here it actually applies all the different filters. So there you go. Pretty cool, right? And it didn't really took that much code to achieve that, and it also maintains our state of the filter. So that is also a bonus. So really hope that you have enjoyed this video. Hey, if you like this video and want to support my channel, then the best way would be to check out my courses on Udemy. I have a lot of iOS development courses, including my brand new course, Introduction to Server-Driven UI in iOS. Server-Driven UI is a brand new technology, so it's always a good idea to jump in and learn right now because it will be very useful in the future apps. You can see I have courses on programming macOS applications also, MVVM design pattern. I even have courses on SwiftUI Cookbook, MVVM design pattern, SwiftUI, Combine, RX Swift, Vapor, and test-driven development, much more. So check out my courses. The link to the courses is right there in the YouTube description. And once again, please try to use those links, as I get to keep a little bit more revenue if you use the referral links. Thank you so much for your continued support, and I really hope you enjoyed this video.